Morgan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Leanne. It's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to introduce you to my audience. Let's start off with an introduction for people who are meeting you for the first time. Let them know who you are and what it is that you do.
Absolutely. So my name is Morgan Danielle, and I'm a relationship coach. I specialize in helping women break out of the toxic relationship cycle and ultimately be able to create the most epic love affairs of their life.
Yes, and that is what really stood out to me when I was looking for guests to be on the show for season 3 of this podcast. I definitely am changing the direction in regards to the conversations that I want to focus more on. And that has to do a lot with relationships, especially the toxic ones, because if you guys been around here for a minute, you know my story, you know my background. But for anyone who's hearing or seeing me for the first time, I am a domestic violence survivor. I'm an advocate, and I'm someone who has habitually been in relationships with really shitty men. And it's my last relationship where I almost lost my life that I really started to do the inner work needed in order to heal, not from just that relationship, but other ones in my past. And I want to talk about it. I want to bring people on like you who have also experienced toxic, abusive relationships. And now you've been able to turn your own pain into your power. And now you're helping women heal and thrive and stop settling for the bullshit that me and you are very familiar with. So I want to start off with you giving kind of a backstory as to what it is you experienced. Go as deep or as superficial as you're comfortable with, but what did your journey look like for you prior to becoming the woman that you are? And was there some sort of pivotal moment, that come to Jesus moment, I like to call, that you realized some shit has got to change in my life?
Absolutely. So I love that you also shared your story on that, because I know that you and I can really relate on such a deep level. And so I've had multiple come to Jesus moments in my life that has allowed me to get to where I am. And so even when I was a young teenager, when I was 13 years old, I was chasing after the bad boys, the wrong boys, the older men. And I really struggled with codependency and love addiction. And now we didn't have that knowledge of the attachment styles back when I was in middle school and high school, but I struggled with disorganized attachment, and I struggled with these things for 13 years of my life. And so it really was a multiple different experiences that I had in my life that were really traumatic, from my first experience with my first ever toxic boyfriend who was about 5 years older than me. And the relationship was physically abusive, emotionally abusive, sexually abusive. And that was something that I didn't really understand what was happening. I was being gaslighted. I was being manipulated with drugs and alcohol. And I just became kind of a shell of myself. And so throughout my high school years, I did struggle with drugs and alcohol and that relationship. And then ultimately he passed away. So that's what really ended our time together. And then when I became more of an adult, I realized, I was like, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep experiencing relationships with men who cheat on me, who hurt me, who abuse me? And so I had a couple abusive relationships after the one that I had just mentioned, including the one with my daughter's father, who also ended up passing away. And so there was a lot of pain and struggle. And the last abusive relationship that I had that was my come to Jesus moment was when I was with a man who threw me into a bathtub, and it resulted in a severe concussion, and I had to go to the hospital, and I had to stay in a pitch black room for about a week. And after that, it was just like, I cannot keep doing this. I have a young child. I have to figure out what this is. And so what that really made me do was turn inward and have some introspection and ask, why does this keep happening to me? And so it was really that question that drove who I am today, was why does this keep happening? Because I really started to look within, and that's when I found self-development. And I kind of realized that it's our experiences in childhood a lot of the time that drive our relationship patterns, that create our relationship blueprint. And when I started to piece things together, it was really quite incredible because I realized that I actually had a choice in this. I actually had a say in who I was attracting, and it could change. And so that journey was painful and it was difficult to figure out. But ultimately, it led me to a place where I overcame codependency, love addiction. I no longer was attracted to abusive men. Then I changed into, emotionally unavailable men, so it wasn't as dangerous and it wasn't as bad. But then I figured out how to stop attracting emotionally unavailable men. And then I really came into overcoming depression, anxiety, a lot of my PTSD symptoms. And now I have the most incredible relationship with the love of my life. And so it really gets me emotional because to see where I was even 5 years ago and to see where I am now, I'm living a completely different life and I feel completely different. I'm a completely different person.
Oh my gosh, there's so many similarities in our stories, which is why I love starting off with the dark and heavy. I really like to get to know the person, who they were before, especially you being in the service industry now, helping people through your lived experience. And there's just so many similarities that I can relate to, which I think it's so beautiful for us to be sitting down and having this conversation, because I know a listener or a viewer is going to see themselves in some aspect of your story. And I just want to say, first and foremost, I'm so fucking proud of you. Yes, it's not easy, especially when you mentioned that you were in multiple toxic, abusive relationships, and they all look different, right? But at the end of the day, what was the common denominator was you. And that's what I realized in my own situations. I was in that abusive relationship that almost ended my life during COVID pandemic. It was a fucking mess. We know how the world was back then. But even before that, I was in an almost 9-year long, really toxic relationship. It did get physically abusive on both ends. I wasn't an angel. I don't want to paint this picture that I was the victim and everything was done to me, because I did some shit too. And I've had, again, this repeated cycle of just bullshit, toxicity, unhealthy codependency, unhealthy coping mechanisms, all of these things. And it wasn't until my come to Jesus moment where I almost lost my life on March 12th, 2021, that God shook me to my core and was like, listen up, bitch. We got to do something different because you are repeating the same cycle. You are wishing for something different, but you're not doing anything to change your circumstance. You're living in this victim mentality, this victim mindset. Oh, woe is me. Everything's happening to me. But like you said, I had the power within me to change my circumstance. It took me for me to almost lose my life in order for me to get to that moment. But it's unfortunate that sometimes it does have to be these big things, like you dealing with loss of, people that you were with, or the concussion. I'm so sorry that you had to experience that, but it's in us sharing our stories that I hope that people can really learn from what we've gone through, to hopefully allow them to do the introspection, the self-reflection, to be like, this is my circumstance right now. I have the opportunity to change it. These two women right here are doing something about it. Again, it's not easy, but look at them. Let me do the same. So kudos to you for being able to turn your pain into power.
Thank you so much. I think it is so important for other people to be able to hear your story and my story and be able to see that there is another way. And I was one of the biggest martyrs. I was always like, oh, look at what's happening to me. Everything's happening to me. And it wasn't until I really just saw that I had power, and we have power. We can change this and we can turn this around. I do hope that's inspiring to the people that are listening to this. I hope that it does really resonate and sink in that this absolutely can change your relationship patterns, your attachment style. It's not a life sentence. It can change, and actually it can change quite quickly when we are consistent.
Yes. Ooh, consistency. Girl, that's the life that I'm trying to live now. So I want to know, you've been on this journey for a while now and you're helping people, but what did it look like for you in the beginning of your self-development healing journey, what tools, what questions did you ask, and what advice would you give to someone who's listening or watching right now, who's in the beginning? They just got out. They're fucking lost. They're broken. All the things that we've felt. Share a little bit about what you did and some advice you would give to someone who's going through that right now.
Yeah. So somebody that just got out of a toxic or abusive relationship, the number one piece of advice is really ask yourself what you learned from this experience, because our pain always has purpose. I like to say everything happens for a reason, but it sounds cliche. But if we can say our pain gets to have purpose, ask what we learned about ourselves. What did we learn about who we're attracting? What did we learn about the way that we are in relationship and the way that we feel? I think that's one of the most valuable things that we can ask, because a lot of the times if we can take ourselves from judgment to curiosity, we have a much better chance at healing and not repeating the same patterns over and over again. And then we meet this experience with compassion for ourselves rather than judgment. Again, when we get out of a toxic or abusive relationship, we are just a shell of ourselves. We're not who we are. And I know that maybe our friends or our family has said that for a long time. You're just not yourself. And so we really need to come back into ourselves. Who are we? What do we like? What do we not like? Who do we like to spend time with? What makes us happy? Because we hadn't been happy in so long when we're in that kind of relationship. We're really just trying to survive. So if we're just constantly trying to survive, then we've lost all our luster and what makes us thrive and what makes us excited in life. And so that's really important for us to get really clear on what makes me feel good. Who am I? What do I enjoy? So that you can start doing those things. And I know that that can be really hard right out the gate when we have just gone through something so traumatic. But I would also focus on feeling all of your feelings without trying to escape them, because that was something that I always did. It was the escapism. I always tried to get away from my feelings and get away from the pain, but it's not about feelings that are so painful. It's the resistance to the feelings. That's where depression comes from. That's where anxiety comes from. That's one of the best things that we can do. And we're all so scared of feeling our feelings because, it was never safe. When we were in childhood, we were told to stop crying. We were told not to feel a certain way. But in reality, one of the best things that we can do for ourselves is feel our feelings, allow ourselves to feel it, allow ourselves to have it, and love ourselves in those feelings. So if you have to make it a beautiful experience, I know that I tell my clients that if you're feeling sad, make that sadness the most beautiful experience of sadness that you possibly can, whether it's putting rose petals in your bath or listening to sad music or watching The Notebook. Whatever it is, let yourself have it without making a story around it. So if I were to put that in a framework, I would say first, feel all your feelings, have so much self-compassion, ask yourself, what did you learn? And then go out and find yourself again through action and self-discovery.
Yes, so many amazing gems that you're dropping. And I think it's so beautiful to be able to work with someone who has that lived experience. That's how I've been able to do a lot of my own healing. I started working with life coaches. I went to therapy, individual and group. I asked those tough questions. I looked in the mirror and cried. I wrote letters to the people who hurt me and to myself. Like, I did all of these things that I wouldn't have known otherwise if I didn't speak up and ask for help and lean on that support, especially for us victims or survivors, whatever you want to call yourself, especially going through toxic and abusive relationships. There is so much isolation. There is so much shame. There's anger. There's resentment. There's fear. There's all of these things, these really negative feelings that can consume you. That leads to the depression, the anxiety, the PTSD, all of these really ugly things that can really take over your life. But I love that you said sitting in the feeling. That's something that I've run away from as well. Definitely someone who would use another person to get over the last one, not want to sit with that pain, that heartbreak, that sadness. But it's in you sitting in your shit, sitting in your mess, accepting it and not judging it, like you said, that's where the healing can really begin. But it's uncomfortable. It sucks. It's such a nasty thing that a lot of people don't want to deal with, but it's in the storm that you can really eventually come out on the other side. And there's two people here who have gone through that and are helping others do the same.
Absolutely. And I would say that, feeling our feelings is what makes us resilient. It's what makes us strong on the inside and soft on the outside, which is what I teach all of my clients how to do, because a lot of the times we have these really tough walls on the outside where we don't let anybody in. And then we're like a runny mess on the inside. But if we can feel our feelings and realize that we're actually stronger than we give ourselves credit for, then we build that resilience, and that's what's going to carry us throughout our life. And when we feel our feelings, that's actually what allows us to be emotionally available. And if we are emotionally available, we'll also be an energetic match for men who are emotionally available. And so it's all about the energy in which we are and that we're giving out that is going to be what we attract as well.
Exactly. Everything starts and ends with you. That's something that I preach a lot about. If you want someone that's healthy, you have to be healthy yourself first, and you have to do the work to get there. And there's something that you talk about a lot, which is manifestation. I would love to know, how do you incorporate manifestation into your coaching with your clients for healing from toxic or abusive relationships?
Yeah, so I've been working with manifestation maybe for the last 7 years, and it's something that I really got excited about in the beginning because I was like, oh my gosh, you can create your reality. And so I would say my process for manifestation and what I use with my clients is, first, we want to get really, really clear on what we want, because a lot of women come to me saying, I have no idea what I want. Because, of course, if we are codependent, then we've had all of this effort and energy and focus going to other people instead of focusing on ourselves, right? And so that's where we have to put the focus back on ourselves and ask, what is it that I want? And go with that clarity, because when we are communicating with God or the universe, we need to be able to send a clear message. And if we're not sending a clear message, it's like, I want to give you what you want, but you're confusing the hell out of me. So we want to get really, really clear. And if we don't know exactly what we want, we have to get really, really clear on how we want to feel. And so the way that I teach my clients how to bring their experiences closer is the clarity on what they want, how they want to feel, and then feel that way now. Become that person now, because it's the be, then the do, then the have. So if you're being somebody who has healthy relationships, you're going to do things that healthy relationship people do, and then you're going to have the thing. And so when we talk about toxic relationships, I believe, and I think this could be triggering for some people, is we are co-toxic in that relationship. So we have toxic behaviors. I was very manipulative. Being codependent in itself is manipulative because you're always doing and giving to get. So we have to become aware of these behaviors. But if you are behaving and you're feeling like a secure woman who is a high value woman, you're not going to be doing that behavior of giving to get or manipulating or being super reactive. And so that's really what I teach my clients, is how to feel that now. How would their highest self feel now, this high value version of themselves? And so when we have that trifecta, having that clarity, and then around what they want, how they want to feel, and then becoming that and feeling that now, of course, coupled with strategy, because, we definitely have to have strategy as well as mindset and energetics. That's the real trifecta here. That really allows the experience to come closer. And I love to journal. That's something that I've done for many years. And I've manifested things from thousands and thousands of dollars to my 6-figure business, to the home that I have, to the relationship that I have, to the dog that I have. And it's a really beautiful process, but we also have to surrender. We have to let go of how it's going to happen. We have to let go of trying to control it and manipulate it. And we have to trust that once we've done our part of the clarity and becoming that person and feeling like that person and behaving like that person, we have to let everything else go. We don't have to know the how. We just have to do the next right thing, the next right step.
Yep. You have to back up what you say with aligned action. I love the gems that you're dropping, and it's making me think about when I worked with one of my life coaches who's specific around relationships and dating. I told her, I want this man, but I'm not really too sure. So she had me do an exercise, write out everything and be super specific about the type of man that you want, from what he looks like to his personality to the way he carries himself to how he treats you. And I actually have that saved in my computer, and just being able to journal it out, write it out, get everything out on there, and then be like, okay, if this is what I want, then this is what I have to become first in order to eventually attract that person. So I think it's super, super beneficial for y'all to get really curious and very clear with what it is that you're looking for, and to also make sure you're looking in the mirror and reflecting and being what you say you want. Like, if you're a toxic person, what do you think you're going to attract? Toxicity. Like, I was very low vibrational when I met my ex-boyfriend. So we were a perfect fucking match. But if I were to come across him today, he couldn't even be in my same bubble because it just wouldn't work. But it comes with, going through those experiences and doing the work and all of that. Thank you so much for sharing the gems that you're dropping, because it's super important for you to get really intentional. And manifestation is more than just thinking and dreaming. Like, you have to do something to back up the words that you say with the actions.
Yeah, I think that has been a major missing piece in manifestation for a lot of people. They're like, I've been journaling about it. I've been journaling about it. I'm like, but what have you done in this 3D reality that we have? Because that's one of the biggest pieces of this, is that action and that strategy piece. And I love that you mentioned that you have to write down all the things that you want. Then who do I have to become in order to receive that? So powerful.
Exactly. Lots of notes that y'all should be taking, because we're dropping a lot of free gems for you guys. So now you talked about codependency, and I want to break that down a little bit more, because that's definitely a challenge that a lot of us deal with in these toxic relationships. I was the queen, like the mayor of codependent town in my relationships, right? I'm sure you can relate. So how do you guide your clients to breaking free from the codependent patterns? And how does the journey towards self-love play a role in breaking free from those patterns?
So I like to start at the beginning. What is the root cause for the codependency? Because I like to say codependency is not really the issue. It's the root cause to the issue. The codependency is really just a symptom. And so when we go back, we typically go back to their childhood and we heal and soothe that inner child on a subconscious level, because the subconscious is where all of our patterning, our conditioning, our relationship blueprint, our core beliefs, that's where all of that lies, which is what has created the codependency. And so once we're able to do that, that's when we can start building on a stable foundation, instead of this kind of shaky foundation where you feel good for a second, then you fall back into old patterns. So that's where we really start. That gives my clients such a stable foundation to really do this other work, because it's their inner child that is feeling like they need to overdo, perform, overgive, and manipulate in order to get what they want. Once we're able to soothe that inner child, we can take her out of the driver's seat and we can start behaving like that high value woman that is in charge. And when it comes to self-love, we're putting all the focus back on us, because a lot of us, we're putting our needs on the back burner. We're not focusing on ourselves, because it's so much easier to point the finger at somebody else or to put the focus on someone else instead of focusing on our own stuff. Because a lot of the times that's way too painful and we just don't want to do it. Or we have a belief that it's selfish to focus on ourselves. And that was something that I grew up with, was it's not safe for me to care about myself, or it's not safe for me to put the focus on me. But what I've come to learn over the years, and what I teach my clients, is only give from the overflow. We have to fill ourselves up first and give from the overflow. And that's such an act of self-love. And I know that self-love is kind of the way, it's kind of just cliche to be like, just love yourself, just love yourself. But what does that actually mean? So when we talk about loving ourselves, it's not just self-care, getting a pedicure, getting a facial, or, giving yourself cute little notes. Those are great. However, it goes so much deeper than that. It's the way that we speak to ourselves, not only when we're doing a good job, but when we royally fuck up. It's the boundaries that we're setting. Are we being a doormat, or are we standing up for ourselves? Are we speaking our wants and our needs? Are we walking away from things that don't serve us? And this is the act of self-love, is doing all of these things. So we're embodying it through these experiences. So when I tell my clients, when we choose ourselves, everything else falls into place. And what's also really amazing is that when we were putting ourselves on the back burner and we were overgiving and overdoing, what do you think we were an energetic match for? The users, the takers, the narcissists. However, when we start putting ourselves first, high value men, healthy masculine men, find that so incredibly sexy when you have boundaries. It automatically raises your value in their eyes. However, we've been taught that we're going to get rejected, we're going to get hurt, we're going to get abandoned if we set those boundaries. But boundaries is one of the most beautiful acts of self-love that we could possibly have. And it's what brings healthy men closer. And that's something that my boyfriend told me when we first started dating. He told me that one of the things that drew him to me the most was my self-respect. And it just goes to show that when I respect myself, I was an energetic match for the most incredible man who takes care of me and makes me feel like a princess, like the luckiest woman in the world. And and that worked because I chose that for myself. I treated myself like my own muse. I cared about what I wanted, how I felt. I was kind to myself and had compassion for myself, even when I made huge mistakes. And that's when you really test your self-love, is how much can I love myself when things didn't turn out the way that I had hoped.
I'm not the only one who's preaching this. Like, I say this all the time on the show. So I know I'm not talking out of my ass, because we have an expert right here who is preaching to the choir and really saying a lot of the things that I stand on. And, you know, like I said before, everything starts and ends with you, and what you put out is what you're going to get back. And it's just so important for you to take that time to really get to know yourself, to do the healing work, to ask those uncomfortable questions, to sit in your shit, because eventually you're going to be able to come out on top and you're going to be able to live a life that you couldn't even imagine. And sometimes it takes for you to go through some really shitty situations. But like we said in the beginning, you have the authority and the power over your life to change it, one from being a victim to being a victor. And this conversation is giving you the permission to really go within and change the way that you need to really become the best version of yourself. But it is going to take some time. It is difficult, but it is possible. So thank you so much for sharing that. So, okay, we know that leaving a toxic relationship is hard as fuck. And especially if it's become abusive, there can be fear, there can be anger, there can be a lot of things. So what would you tell someone who feels like they're trapped or feels like they're afraid to leave, but they really have it set in their heart to do so, but they're afraid to take that first step? How can they shift their mindset in order to break free and empower themselves to leave?
Yes. And I would say, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's how I live my life. I did not get to where I am today by staying inside my comfort zone. And I know that it's terrifying to leave a toxic or abusive relationship because there's so much unknown. And what's really quite tragic is that we're more comfortable a lot of the time in the toxic or abusive relationship. As much as it's uncomfortable, we are comfortable there because the pain that we're feeling, we know how that feels. We know what to expect.
It's familiar.
Exactly. But we don't know what it's like on the other side. We don't know what it's like when we leave that, because also there are some payoffs from being in that relationship. There always are some payoffs, even if they're very minuscule. And so we're leaving that behind, and we just don't have the certainty of what's on the other side. So my first thing would be, feel the fear and do it anyway, because you know what? You're experiencing pain now. You're going to experience pain when you leave, but only one of those things is going to get you closer to the life and the love that you want to have. And so what I did for myself was I held my vision of my why. I held my vision of my why so incredibly strongly because I knew that I wanted my daughter to have an incredible father in her life. I knew that I wanted to be happily married one day and be an inspiration to other women who have gone through this. I had this vision that I knew that I wanted to have, and it wasn't only for myself, it was for others, but it's just having a vision for yourself is just as important because we have one life. And this really gets me every time is understanding how precious life is. After so much loss that I've gone through and attempting suicide myself a few times in earlier on in my life, I've come to realize how precious life is. And we throw it away sometimes, unintentionally, of course. We throw it away sometimes when we're in these relationships. And 100 years, if we're lucky, is actually a very short amount of time. And that's even what drives me to this day to do all of the hard things, because we have one life. We've got one shot here on this earth right now in this body. And we want to make the most of it. We want to look back when we're at the end of our life. We want to look back and say, holy shit, I am so proud of myself for the woman that I've become. I'm even going to get emotional now. Like, I'm so proud of myself for doing those hard things and for creating the most epic love affair of my life, for creating a life that I was on fire about, and for doing the things that I was so scared of. And that's what really gets me, is knowing that that day is going to come. And I want to be proud when I'm old and gray and I have grandkids and my daughter's there with me. I want to be able to say how proud I am and really just soak up the life that I created for myself. And that has really been a driving force for me. And I hope that that can be a driving force for everyone that's listening to this, because time is so limited. And a lot of the times we think we're invincible and we take it for granted, but it is short. And I work with a lot of women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way into their 70s. And they know, they're like, you know what? It's time. It's time for me.
It is time for you to stop letting someone's dusty ass son stress you the fuck out anymore, okay? It's time for you to love yourself, to put yourself first, to say, fuck this, no more. I'm not dealing with this shit. I'm going to put myself first. And especially for my moms out there, I know how hard it is. I'm a single mom to a teenager and I fucking get it, man. It is so difficult, but we set the tone for what it is that they feel like is acceptable for them, especially when they get to our ages where they start dating. And if you're perpetuating this cycle of toxicity, of abuse, of cheating, of lying, they're going to be like, well, this is normal. This is what I saw growing up. So I'm going to continue the cycle, generational trauma that I talk about all the time. Like, it's so much bigger than just you. Like you said too, I mean, I think COVID let us all know how quickly your life can change and how quickly it can be taken away from you, right? Y'all, there's too much life out there for you to live to just be fucking miserable in these shitty relationships that are only taking from you and not allowing you to grow and be your best self. And sometimes it's going to take for you to walk away. As scary as it can be, you have no idea how beautiful your life can be if you don't decide to take that first step. Okay, 2 more questions I want to ask. No, 3. So I've been single and celibate for 3 years now because I've been really focused on Leanne and doing the inner healing. But actually this weekend, we're recording in February, but this weekend I'm going speed dating for the very first time ever in my life. And I'm fucking terrified.
I love that. I'm so excited for you.
Yes, because, I met my ex on the apps and I don't want to go down that route again. I'm not a huge fan of the apps. I know some people love it, some people don't. I want to do something different. But, being someone who's re-entering the dating scene, especially after leaving a toxic relationship, that can be very daunting, right? So give me some advice, and listeners out there who, when it comes to starting over, what would you tell them and how can they approach re-entering the dating scene with a fresh perspective of not letting your past control your future?
Absolutely. So before I met my boyfriend, I was in a relationship where I had gotten cheated on, and it was really traumatic because, we had moved for this guy and, my daughter was involved, and it was the best relationship I had had up until that point. Right. And so after that happened, it was just a punch to the gut. My heart was ripped wide open. And I decided in that moment, when I decided to get back out into the dating world, I said, you know what? I'm willing to get my heart broken. And that's the scariest thing, because you're like, no, I don't want to do this again. But I knew if I could get through what I went through with my ex and be able to feel okay again, then I was willing to be able to put myself in any kind of situation because I knew I could handle it. So I would say having that approach first is really wonderful, because otherwise we're going to be closed off. Our heart is going to be closed off. We're going to maybe self-sabotage. We fear that emotional intimacy again. And so if we can go in with saying, I'm willing, it doesn't mean that we're attracting it or it's going to happen. But if we're willing, then the fear is no longer going to control us. So that's first and foremost what I would say for you. Second is mindset. And so I'm actually a huge fan of dating apps. And I know I didn't used to be, but I fully believe that we can have success with any strategy that we use as long as we have the proper mindset. And so for the mindset, if you're going into speed dating, I would go in with curiosity of, I'm just coming here to learn who I am, what I want, and see what kind of connections that I can make. Because a lot of the times we get really focused on the outcome, and that being focused on the outcome creates resistance. And then we get really attached. And then it's like the first person that shows us interest, we will abandon all our boundaries for, or we'll attach onto them without them really earning anything, or, we'll create a story about them or a fantasy about them. So I would say going in with the mentality of, I'm learning about myself, I'm curious, I'm learning about others, and every experience that I have is getting me closer to creating the most epic love affair of my life. So this is everything that I tell my clients. And actually, I've had 2 clients this week who just got commitment from the man that they've been seeing. And that's just this week. And so we really focus on, that's one of the first things that we focus on when it comes back to them getting into dating, is that mindset around, I am a high value woman. I am the drug he cannot get enough of. I radiate my magnetism, and I'm sexy, I'm flirty, and really building yourself up in that way and saying, I'm open to being surprised. I'm open to new opportunities. I'm open to new connections, and really just make it all about opening yourself up and believing that you can attract amazing men. So when I was online dating, when I met my boyfriend, we actually met on Bumble. That was one of the things that I did for myself, was I actually met him through a dating experiment that I was doing. And it was all about me believing that I could attract really great men. I knew that amazing men were out there, and I started looking for evidence that amazing men were out there. And so I would look at some of my friends' relationships. I would look at other people's relationships that I really admired. And I knew that if they could do it, then that was evidence for me that I could have that too. And so that was really my mindset around it. And then also, when you're going into this speed dating, I would focus again on getting in touch with your feelings. One of the best ways that men can really connect with your heart, a lot of times you hear that the way to a man's heart is through food or sex or spirituality or anything like that. The best way to a man's heart, and to get him to swoon over you and love you and want to ask you out on the first, second, third, fifth date, is to really get connected with your own emotions and be able to communicate that to him. And so if you guys are talking on this speed dating, getting really clear on what makes you feel good. So this is where you're getting really clear on your hobbies, your interests, what you like to do, things that light you up, where you feel excited, and then being able to express that using language that I like to call it I feel language. And so if you're saying, I feel so amazing when I go out into nature, it makes my whole day better to be able to feel the sunshine on my face and the wind in my hair. Is that so much better than I like to go hiking? And so having that kind of descriptive emotional language, you're not doing it for him, you're actually doing it for you to get more connected and into your body. Because when we are, after we've been in abusive and toxic relationships, I mean, pretty much our whole life, actually, if we are in those situations, is we're operating from our masculine. And so everything from the neck up is your masculine, or everything from the head up is your masculine, everything from the neck down is your feminine. And so we want to get you into your body as much as possible, and then being able to convey that to somebody. Because a man, we want to be able to evoke these emotions in a man. And we can only do that if we're connected with our heart. And so if you're talking about your career, instead of saying, I do X, Y, Z, you can say, it feels so good to me that I get to help hundreds of women and it fulfills me, or it makes me feel like I'm making a difference. It's so much different when you romanticize your life in that way. And that's really what men respond to, because if a man can feel his emotions in your presence, I mean, he's going to want to be with you. And that's a beautiful thing. And if a man feels safe in your presence with emotions, it's huge, because a lot of the times women can be very reactive and they can be very cold and hard. And the most attractive thing to a man is when a woman can express her feelings, but do it in a way that's safe for everyone involved.
I'm going to listen back to that before I go on Saturday, because there's so many good nuggets that you dropped, and I'm excited for what's to come. I made the decision within myself to no longer allow the trauma that I experienced in my last relationship control me meeting someone new. You know, I feel like it's been 3 years. I've done enough healing. I'm in a better place, and now I'm ready to open up my heart, like you said. So I will definitely keep you guys posted on how that goes.
Can't wait.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I also do want to highlight, in your professional opinion, being that you worked with a lot of clients, especially around dating and relationships and all that, when it comes to re-entering the dating scene, especially after leaving a toxic or abusive relationship, share some red flags that we should look out for, especially as women, on when we should be like, this is maybe an orange flag, or I got to get the fuck out of here because this is burning red.
Yep. And I would say, so for that, I want to say boundaries for women in getting back out into the dating world is so incredibly crucial. And that's going to be the determining factor of if you get into a toxic or abusive or relationship or a situationship or a healthy relationship. It's going to be your boundaries. And what I would say the first thing to look for is love bombing. We've all, if you've been in a toxic relationship, an abusive relationship, you know it, you felt it, and you knew in your gut that something didn't feel right. And of course, the oxytocin tends to take over when we're getting love bombed, when things are moving quickly. I like to tell my clients that relationships that start off hot tend to burn quickly. That's what I tell all of my clients. And so we need to slow it down. If somebody is love bombing us by saying overly romantic things, doing big romantic gestures, say, you know, he's wanting to fly you on a trip for your second date, you would say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. Or if he's saying, oh my gosh, it feels like I've known you my whole life and I think I'm falling in love with you. You're the most amazing woman I've ever met. You're the most beautiful woman that I've ever met. I don't deserve you. Any of that shit, we're going to say goodbye, because it is absolutely inappropriate for somebody to say those things or early on in that way. It takes time to fall in love. It takes time to get to know somebody and build that emotional intimacy. However, for those of us who have had trauma in our past, it feels so good when we get love bombed. And so we latch onto that because we have so many insecurities. We don't feel like we're good enough. So then we have somebody in the external world telling us that we're good enough for the very first time. Our oxytocin, we're going to put those rose-colored glasses on. The oxytocin is going to be flowing. And then the judgment part of our brain is just going to shut down. And then, holy shit, 3 months later, we're in this situationship, this abusive relationship, and we have no idea how the hell we got there, right? And so love bombing would be the absolute first thing I would say to look out for. If something feels odd, if what they're saying doesn't add up, then trust that. And I would say too, if there's any lying, if their words and their actions aren't aligning, if something just doesn't quite add up, get the fuck out. There's no reason. There's so many amazing men out there. You do not need to put up with that behavior. And if we have this mindset of there's an abundance of amazing men out there, then we're not going to be settling for these guys that we're like, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they were just nervous or whatever. It's like I heard a couple of my clients talk about asking me about men who lie about their age on dating sites. That's a red flag to pay attention to right off the bat. If you're going to lie to me about your age, what else?
You're going to lie to me about everything.
Yep. And that's completely inappropriate. And so we need to know what our boundaries are. We need to be able to check in with our bodies and be able to trust ourselves. Does this feel weird? Is my gut telling me something? So we need to really get good at trusting our intuition, knowing what our intuition feels like and sounds like. Another red flag is if he's trying to introduce you to his kids too early, or wanting to meet your kids really early, or your friends, as well as if they're trying to make you feel guilty. I tell my clients to keep their options open until they found a man that they want nothing to change with. And I really encourage dating multiple men at one time so that you learn what you like, what you don't like. You're learning about yourself. You're pacing yourself in these different connections. And until that man steps up and asks you to be his girlfriend, you don't give him girlfriend privileges. And so that's what's going to be really important for everyone to keep in mind when they're getting back into the dating world and when they're paying attention to these things, is those boundaries are so, so crucial at this point in time. And so if anyone makes you feel guilty for dating other people early on, say you guys are on your second date and he's telling you that he wants you to get off the apps and that it needs to be only him, and he's making you feel guilty, that's when you just get out, because it's not a healthy dynamic right from the get-go.
Absolutely. If he tells you 5 days after meeting you that he's falling in love with you, that's what my ex did to me. And then a month later, he moved in and never fucking left. That is a red flag, ladies and gentlemen. So please, so many amazing gems and nuggets that you're dropping. I appreciate you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise. I do want to ask you, since you're on the Watch Us Thrive podcast, tell me, what does thriving mean to you?
Thriving means that you are not only surviving, you're not just living a mediocre life, you are actually on fire about your life. You're happy, you're joyful, you're creating a life and a love that you feel expanded. And that's the way that I try to live my life. I don't like just living a monotonous life where nothing's changing and, I'm just in this box and everything just feels the same every day. I like to live a life that feels exciting and delicious and something I can look forward to, and having new experiences and really making the most out of life. And that comes back to feeling the way that I want to feel. I want to feel abundant. I want to feel expanded. And I try to have as many experiences as I can that allows me to feel that way.
Yes, I love that so much. I love the word delicious. I'm going to start using that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Morgan, thank you so much for being here. I would love for you to share how people can follow you, how could they work with you, if you have any special projects coming up, and any last minute words of advice you want to share.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook. My name is Morgan Danielle. I also have a Facebook group called Break the Cycle, where I have tons and tons of free resources, videos, all the things that you guys can just plug in and watch whenever it's convenient for you. You can find me on Instagram. It's _Morgan Danielle. And then I have my group coaching program, which I've been running for the last 3.5 years now, and it's called Empowered Academy. This is the most epic program I've ever created, where my clients are going from heartbroken, codependent, to anxiously attached, having toxic and abusive relationships, to having the most epic love affairs of their life. They're getting married, they're getting engaged, they're getting exclusivity, they're getting the girlfriend status, and they are happy, they are thriving. And it does happen quickly. It's 6 months long, and it does happen quickly if you are consistent, and it's really quite incredible. So I would say looking into all of those resources and seeing what the best fit for you is. And my last piece of advice here is continuing to choose yourself even when it's hard, continuing to speak up for yourself even when your voice shakes, because it really does. That is what makes you an energetic match for people who will love you and respect you, is when you do that for yourself.
I couldn't think of a more perfect way to end this conversation. Morgan, thank you again so much for your wisdom, for you sharing your truth and your story. And I'm so excited to continue working with you and allowing people to know that, like, we've been through some shit, you've been through some shit, but look at us now, and you can absolutely come out on the other side thriving and living your absolute best life. So thank you. We're going to link all her info in the show notes. And until next time, keep glowing, growing, and thriving.